And this is a talk by Jensen, C. John Burk, and Marjorie, Holland. Transatlantic connections, marsh floras, and vegetation along the gradient from freshwater to ocean salinities along the Elbe, Northern Europe, and Connecticut, northeastern North America rivers. Go for it, John.
Well, thank you very much. I have taught in this room for years, off and on, and the great difference between this audience and a student audience is what you look out and see. When you look out and see students these days, you see a sea of laptops, and you're not really sure just exactly what they are looking at. Here, I don't see a laptop, and we're looking forward. The title reflects a little bit the difficulty of writing something that would be equally transmittable on both sides of the Atlantic. I'd like to say something about my co-authors on this. Jensen is Jesse's and would have been my equivalent at Hamburg University. He was at Smith College in 2005 on an exchange the Smith College had with Hamburg University. The exchange went very, very well. He came back the next year, and we have reciprocally visited one another and done various research problems since. He's in a salt marsh up there, Maine, on his first visit. Marjorie Holland, I think a number of you know, Marjorie was a graduate student here in the mid-70s. She worked on the flora of the oxbows along the Connecticut River as a doctoral dissertation, and she was she remains an ideal graduate student because she comes back and resamples, and she has done this on a regular basis, usually about 10-year intervals on the various marshes she looked at along the rivers. Well, she was actually back in this area resampling in 2006 on Kai's second long visit. Marjorie's resampling has been, as I said, a model in here. Kai became aware of it, and we all discussed this, and saw that it might be very useful to compare the Elbe River, which flows through Hamburg, and the Connecticut, which of course flows here. This is from Marjorie's original sampling, compared the Arcadia Marsh. Are people here going to Arcadia on Saturday? Good, good. Well, you're going to look out from the tower there, and you probably will see the green tree on the right. You will not see the dead tree standing there, and will not see it the next sample. This is how Arcadia looked as Marjorie began the sampling of it. What Kai suggested, and what we began to follow through, was a comparison with Connecticut and the Elbe. There are good reasons to compare the two streams. There are also rather critical differences. If you contrast Hamburg and Hartford, Hamburg is the uppermost point, more or less, of tidal activity on the Elbe. Hartford is more or less the uppermost point on the Connecticut. But if you contrast the two, Hamburg is 800 miles farther north. The various climatic changes brought by the Gulf Stream and various things make the climate actually in Hamburg somewhat milder than the climate that we have here, and I find this in regular correspondence with Kai. The distances are rather different, but they become more comparable if you look only at the estuarine portion of the stream. If you look at the areas going down from tidal fresh to brackish to salt marsh, the distances are comparable. If you look at the distance between the tidal fresh and where we sampled in non-tidal marsh, they're rather more marked, and there is, and I wanted to make a point here, there is plenty of good habitat between, in the Hamburg, between the tidal fresh and the non-tidal fresh that we sampled, but it goes through the old East Germany, and an authoritarian strain has remained there, and the persons in charge are people with bird preservation, the Bird Preservation Society. They do not like plant ecologists any place to train my breast. This is Kai looking out over an area labeled on the map, Old Riverbed and it was a place we could not sample. Finally, however, with some perseverance, discovered that just a little bit farther, what would be upstream in this, there was a series of oxbows, very, very much comparable to the ones that Marjorie sampled. There were 5 of them actually, near the town of Magdeburg, and we used those then as our major sampling site. I'm going to take you on a field trip. I'm going to go downstream. I hesitate here because the differences are rather striking here. The Elbe runs across Europe from to the northeast, basically, to the east to the North Sea. The Connecticut, of course, runs north and south. Kai is standing in a very large stand of Phragmites, which is a dominant plant here. That is a dominant plant along much of the Elbe, going on its way to the sea. This is the non-tidal freshwater site. The tidal freshwater site, this is a class. Students are going out to an island, actually, in the Elbe, and it's a park, and there's a connection from it to get people out there. In other words, it would not have been easily accessible. Otherwise, the tall grass is Phragmites again, and there are a number of aquatic plants in there, some of which are familiar. Going into farther, again, towards the mouth of the Elbe, the brackish sites. Here we had a problem with, in the sampling, of areas that have been browsed of late. At the present time, this is an area that's part of a national park. Sheep are not supposed to be allowed to graze there, but you can see actually sheep approaching the fence that is separating the public land from the private area. Occasionally they browse it, and I think there is evidence of sheep damage in the marshes themselves, certainly in the flora that evolves. That's the town of Stade on the far side. We're approaching the top of the estuary. And then we are into the salt marsh. This is the plant ecology class on that tape that you saw the group going over the island. We're in the salt marsh, obviously. The dominant plant where they are standing is, to some surprise, partly a North American plant. It's Spartina anglica, which is the hybrid of Spartina alterniflora, of course, in Spartina marittima. And that has done a great spread in Germany in the last few decades. Now, back to Arcadia, trying to play these two off against each other. We're up on the tower at Arcadia, where I think the people who are taking the trip will go. If you look down, the plant on the right is still there, but you see the marsh is much, much more rich and diverse than it was in the first slide that we showed of it. This is a result of cleanup in the Mill River. The Mill River is a stream that runs past Smith College, goes into the Oxbow of the Connecticut, and passes through Arcadia. And in the time that I have been at Smith, I came here in '61, the river has been cleaned up a tremendous degree. Pollution of various sorts, oil spill and various things, all played their effects, and the vegetation is reflecting this very clearly. Okay, we are at Arcadia, the non-tidal freshwater marsh. Going down to the tidal marsh, now we are in Connecticut here. This is an unusual marsh, and we have gone down there and looked at it a couple times, trying to figure out what exactly is going on. I will show you the reason it is unusual. Then to complete the field trip, a brackish marsh farther down towards Long Island Sound, and then finally, of course, a Connecticut River marsh, just as the river goes into Long Island Sound in the south. Okay, our sampling protocol is as follows. We selected, as you can tell, 4 marsh types: freshwater, tidal freshwater, tidal brackish, and tidal salt. And we tried to get 5 sites per marsh type. Tried to get actually distinctive marshes in each one of them. Then the field sampling involved 15 1-meter by 1-meter quadrats, rather larger quadrats than I'd be happy with. I'd like to have been happier with more quadrats than few smaller ones, but 15 quadrats, rather large ones, and each one placed in each marsh, dividing these between high, mid, and low, so that we were sampling the vegetation at various levels. These are distinctive in both streams, both in the Elbe and on the Connecticut, and there's considerable overlap, of course, of vegetation between them. The curious thing about the on the Connecticut, particularly with the tidal freshwater marsh, is reflected in this. On the two streams, very clearly, the Connecticut had the highest species richness, the total number of species. There were simply more plants on this side, and in both streams, the number of plants sampled going down the stream decreased as we approached the salt water. This is no great surprise, the fact that they decreased. We thought that the stresses first of salt and then the tidal amplitudes would play the role on reducing this. The thing that we did not expect, looking at diversity another way, not species richness or total species, but looking at the number of taxa per 15 meters squared, basically per site, per marsh site, where we can get some sampling variation in this. The differences between the two streams are not as striking, and actually the Elbe was, in some cases, had more species in it, but there was a total more species between the Elbe, the total more in the Connecticut, simply because of plants piling up. But in the tidal freshwater, it's broke the tendency to go from greatest diversity before you got into the tidal amplitudes, went way out of that particular system. And we went down again and looked at these marshes, and basically, well, let me show you another way to look at it. Here's how they look in the spring of the year. This is Calcandra varieties of rushes in there, and a lot of bare soil, a lot of bare mud, and I think it's the addition of area habitat for annual species, which possibly causes the diversity to go so high. Certainly things like Zizania don't have their equivalents along the Elbe. Another way of looking at that, if you looked at the tidal freshwater marsh, in the total area sample, we got 46 species, and 281 occurrences, and realized the plants spread out, so it was totally, total cover at the height of the season. In the Connecticut River, there were 69 species and 750 occurrences. In other words, what was happening here, we believe, is that the plants were basically packing in as the season progressed. The final thing that we did, one of the final things we did, was to start an analysis of the floras themselves in terms of their broader distribution, not just what we saw, but where they are, where they have been reflected. And we used for information Arthur Haynes' very, very valuable New England flora and a German data set, which is kept up to date and apparently is authoritative. So what we did is take the flora of the marshes that we looked at, and we looked in that flora, what was their general occurrence? In other words, where were they found, both in Germany and in New England generally, expanding it beyond the Connecticut itself. There were 6 categories, which are pretty obvious, I think. One group is native to both Germany and New England. Typholatifolia is a good example of that. Another is native to Germany, introduced in New England. There are a lot of plants there in that category. Phragmites certainly is one. Third category is present in Germany only, that is not found in the New World, or at least in this part of the New World. That's a very scant category. I really cannot cite a plant that would be familiar to you. Native to New England, introduced in Germany. There are some, but not many. I've already mentioned the Spartina alternate flora genotype. Another plant is Sagittaria latifolia, which occurs in the freshwater marsh along the Elbe. Plants present in New England only, and by New England I mean in comparison here, a great number of them. There's a very, very strong American component and in the New World marshes and the Connecticut River marshes that there is not there, obviously, in New England. And then finally, there's a little group that's not native to either Germany or New England. A very, very small group. Acorus calamus is one of them, however, and there's a little composite from South Africa, which has gotten itself on both sides. So, they work out as a spectrum, and our summary in this, looking at it, about 20% of the species in the Connecticut River marshes are native to both continents. In the Elbe River, the marshes, this number is markedly higher, and it rises in the salt marsh to about half of the species. It's a basic core marsh flora. Most marsh species sampled along the Elbe occur as native or introduced species in New England. There are only a very few that are known from Germany only. I've already said this basically. Relatively few New England species have been introduced into Europe, although they do exist regularly, and in some parts of Europe there are more of them. And in both tidal and non-tidal Connecticut marshes, 50% more of the species sampled are strictly North American in nature. So what we're doing is looking at this and trying to wrap things up in terms of taxonomy, actually named species. There's a little, two points I'd like to end with here. One is some plants are common to both areas, but they are not behaving in the same way in both sites. And you're looking here at marsh marigold in the tidal freshwater on the Elbe. That totally surprised me. I do not know tidal freshwater supporting marsh marigolds in this area. If you do, please tell me about it. This is one of the most striking ones. And then to end up on this same site, basically we're looking across the Elbe. There's a big container ship moving out to sea. The German government would very much like to broaden the Elbe, and in doing so, they are threatening the marshes, and we see this as a major threat, a major area that has to be watched in terms of conservation in the future. So, Elizabeth is making noises.